Hello, boys and ghouls. Welcome to the 100th episode of Dads for the Crypt. My name is Jason, and I'm joined by Jody.
Hello.
And Mondo.
Hello.
And tonight we will be discussing Creepshow the movie. But since this is our 100th episode, we wanted to have a very special guest, without whom Jody, Mondo, and I probably would have never met and started the very podcast you're listening to. He is the co-founder of Bloody Good Horror website and host of the Bloody Good Horror podcast. And he composed our theme music. His name is Eric Newell. Welcome.
Two things. I literally forgot I composed your theme music. I did, and that was it was a lot of fun. And I had no idea this was your 100th episode, and I now feel embarrassed by the praise. But thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I know I have to get you by surprise anyways, or else you would have run away from it.
That's pretty perceptive, Jason.
Well, we've been listening to you for like, I don't know, 10 years, something like that. You get to know someone vicariously.
I appreciate being seen.
Yes. Or not seen sometimes. But in case someone has, for some reason, not heard of Bloody Good Horror, why don't you give us your elevator pitch?
Yeah, I mean, man, I don't even know what it is at this point. It's a weekly roundtable horror podcast where we review largely new releases. It's a mix of, it used to be all theatrical, now it's theatrical and obviously VOD because that's the world we live in and it makes life easier, honestly. We just hit over 700 episodes this year, just to kind of give people an idea of like how long we've been doing it.
And when did you start?
Our first episode aired around Halloween 2007.
Wow.
You were kind of on that first wave of podcasts that came out.
Yeah.
When people first started doing it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there were like a handful and there were some, the only other one, whatever, I'm not going to start promoting other people's podcasts. There's a couple that are still around, but it's not a lot.
Yeah.
But it's like I don't know. We enjoy doing it. For me, it's largely a social thing at this point. I mean, you talk about giving BGH credit for kind of bringing you guys together. We met all you guys through our community and like, it's become a huge part of my life in general, not just like internet life,
Yeah. So, I mean, those that know our lore, me, Mono, and Jody all met through the Bloody Good Horror Slack, and especially during COVID when we started doing trivia, that's kind of how we all started really meeting, and that's kind of
Jody, the trivia master.
Jody, the trivia master, exactly. So again, we are eternally grateful to you and all the other supporters of Bloody Good Horror for getting us all together. So let's move to tonight. We're talking about Creepshow, and Eric, I know this is a very special movie for you. So tell me about your association, relationship, history with Creepshow.
Yeah, sure. Well, you and I, Jason, were chatting a little bit pre-show about nostalgia. I think that's definitely going to be a topic of discussion with this one. When I say this movie is like in my bones, I mean like it is in my bones. That's probably largely a product of the fact that it used to air on, I believe, USA. A lot of my movie memories are like TNT or USA. Something in my gut tells me this was a USA one. I have no evidence to back that up. But the funny thing is too, actually, I guess I was going to say this later on, but the TV cut that USA used to play didn't have the last story. And so like, I realized later on, I like rented it when I was in college and was like, what is this? Like I had no idea there was just a whole other story in there. So that was you don't get mind blowing things like that too much these days, but I am obsessed with the color. For an anthology, they're just these wonderful, simple little stories brought to life by like a surprisingly very strong cast. I mean, I'll even give Stephen King credit for his, he made choices and he committed to them, and I appreciate that. My favorite is Hal Holbrook. Like, I think I was the only 11-year-old on earth who would name Hal Holbrook as his favorite actor. And the other big thing for me was the music. I could go for 20 minutes. I don't know how deeply you want me to get into it, but it is one of those aspects. It is one of my favorite horror soundtracks, and that's a thing we can get into later as well.
Definitely. I had a very similar experience where I saw this on network TV when I was a kid. But I think I only saw the Stephen King one, and then I only saw half of Something to Tide You Over. Because
was that like a Sunday creature feature or
exactly.
something?
So I remember when I was a kid, I was just flipping around. I was like, "What is this?" And I remember a very like core memory of watching this man becoming consumed by the green goo. And then I remember watching the next one. It must have been like just done together with before the commercials. And the commercial cut before the zombie part of Something to Tide You Over. So I didn't know that was part of it until I finally rented and watched the whole thing. So it's it's very interesting how I think a lot of our generation grew up watching things kind of piecemeal sometimes.
Yeah.
But we'll get into all of these segments. So Jody, you are our plot synopsizer. Why don't you start us off? This is Creepshow, came out November 12th, 1982.
Yeah, so most of these stories are so simple that they can be synopsized in like a sentence or two. It's the presentation. It's not so much that the stories are like we're super complicated. So the prologue of this one is literally just a boy gets a comic book and his dad throws it in the garbage. And that's your wraparound.
And like, strikes him like
and then he says, "That's why God made fathers, babe."
Yes. That's a hell of a
one
line.
of the best lines in movie history.
We can say Tom Atkins needs some therapy in this. Like that guy needs to go to therapy, and he's got some demons.
He says that, by the way, while he's pouring beer into a regular drinking glass, which has always driven me insane. It's like a milk glass
with all the foam.
Yeah, I just upside down. Yeah, that's not how you do it, buddy.
You think Tom Atkins would know how to play?
I also don't believe an alcoholic to that degree would even care about having a glass.
No. You got to think, you have all these people now that are like wine enthusiasts or they're beer enthusiasts, which is basically
that's true. They do usually have fancy glasses.
Yeah, alcoholism disguised as a hobby,
right?
But my pet peeve with that is when when people take a picture of their beer in the glass, you see all the bubbles because it's dirty as hell, and I'm like, please clean your glassware before you use it.
All right, Jody.
All right, so our first segment is Father's Day. And all of these segments come from the comic book. Like you see the comic book laying around, pages flip. You have the creep floating around in the background. He does nothing mostly. Like he just kind of is there in the background and makes faces and sometimes goes animated.
He creeps.
But it's definitely very EC Comics, just with a silent narrator. He's just there, kind of being the force that gets these stories going.
I love how the way they animate the panels and then the comic, to the point where like I wish they would go slower so I could see what is actually on each of those panels. I know now you can get screen grabs. At the time it must have been like really annoying not able to see.
That was the fun of it though, right? Yeah. Every time you rewatch it, it's like, okay, now I'm gonna start here.
Or pausing your VHS tape and trying to catch that moment. Rewind, pause. All
right, so the first segment, like I said, is called Father's Day, and it's about a family getting together for a dinner, and they all start talking about kind of family secrets, and it's kind of an open secret that the great aunt murdered her father. And then, I mean, he comes back, and that's the basic plot. There's some family stuff going on, and there's a ashtray that floats from segment to segment. But yes, it's a really simple story of a zombie dad who starts murdering everybody.
But we get Ed Harris showing some dance moves.
Oh, the dance moves are so awesome. So this movie too, like you figure, came out in 1982, but
yeah,
what you can tell from this segment is like, oh man, this really was still that. It's so presuming they wrote and shot it 80, 81, right? It's straddling that line between 70s and 80s, because Ed Harris is full late 70s. Like there's nothing 80s about Ed Harris in this movie.
Yeah, definitely.
But I love this whole bit because it's like he's the cipher for the audience entering into this. You know what it is? I've been watching Succession lately. This is very Succession-like. It's like he is the normie entering into this cold, rich, dysfunctional family. And then really that's the setup, right? Is you're gleaning things about their relationships from this little ping-ponging back and forth that they're doing.
Yeah, and then we get some really good effects work on the zombie. It looks fantastic. Like they do lots of close-ups.
There's so much I love about this one. First of all, I don't know what this says about me, but I kind of have a thing for the matriarch character, the like real cold, mean lady. There's not enough money in the world for all the therapy that would require, but there's something
Totally
there.
fine. You could ask Jason, like, if you're gonna be mean to me, like, we can
She's
talk.
she's got a vibe. I'm just saying. Like, I love the interaction between all of these people. I absolutely love the crazy aunt character.
Yes.
We get the flashback too about her life and how her husband gets killed, and that's right away. Like, just no one has ever done, I don't think, such a genuine feeling comic book visual style as this movie, and it really is shining right out of the gate with this flashback sequence. Or when a character feels an emotion, the background drops out and the lightscapes take over, right? Like, but I absolutely love this aunt character. She strikes.
She reminded me of the old lady from Knives Out. Yeah, that's like an homage in some way. I get that.
She also, I always had this feeling that she was a much younger actress playing old, because she looks very done up as an older person. So like, I kind of think she might be hot too. Aside, but again, like, to your point, this is an extremely simple story, but it's, I think what makes it work for an anthology. I always say, like, Creepshow is the perfect anthology, and this is the because I know you guys are reviewing a lot of anthologies right now, right? This is the bar I hold it up, and I think this holds true with Creepshow. You have to have a banger out off the top, and it's better if it's short. If you got a dud, it goes second, because you've already got buy-in from the first one, and people aren't tired yet, so they're not going to give up. Then, like, the third one, 3 and 4, that's where you got to, like, really knock it out of the park. And then 5 is for your quirky, weird thing at the end. And that, like, feeling about how you make an anthology film is fully from this movie.
I mean, this was the penultimate anthology. And I mean, in my opinion, the best anthology movie ever made. And it's the one by everyone after. Every anthology after this is going to be judged by how it holds up to Creepshow, in my opinion.
I mean, we've kind of buried the lead on the talent behind this is George A. Romero directing and Stephen King writing. I mean, you can't ask for a better combination.
And it's the two of them really at, like, not that people have different creative cycles in their life. I don't want to say, like, their peak as in they're fallen off, or, well, George Romero did fall off. He's dead. But like,
I mean, this really is Stephen King at his coked out, like,
craziest, right? Like, where he's writing fucking banger classics every year, just crank, you know, like, he was at the crest of a wave in some sense. Romero was seasoned and knew what he was doing, and it was a really magical time for them to collaborate.
And like I said, you know, all these descriptions are going to be so short, but it's how they do it.
Yeah,
it's the characters, it's the lighting. The lighting's huge. It's the way that they make this feel like a comic book all the way throughout. You know, the stories are so simple, and that they don't need to be complicated, because the way that they're doing the storytelling does all of it for you.
And there's little, like, go ahead.
I was like, imagine any other movie there where they just kicked on some makeup on some guy and had him walk around and say, "I want my cake." Like, how stupid that would have been, like, but made by almost anyone else.
I want to meet the sound designer that created the design for the voice, because, dude, I mean, Mondo probably knows, because I know he's an audiophile. You listen to this movie on, like, a real sound system, and that voice is, like, rumbling your house, but it is so effective.
It's so good. It's so good.
So my favorite line, and again, like, it's where the Stephen Kingisms kind of shine through, and I don't know why, it's just, like, there's not much to it, but the rich guy, the younger brother, I love him. He's just, like, snivelly and sort of a feat, and, like, he doesn't really, there's no love in his family, right? It's again, it's Succession. It's all thinly veiled aggression and, like, quips and coldness and stuff. But he, at one point, the sister finally, she gets vulnerable because she's scared, and he has a moment where, like, he's almost human for a second, and he's like, "All right, come on." And they go to look in the kitchen. It's right at the end, I guess. But they walk back in the kitchen and the lights are off, and he goes, in just the most, like, snide tone possible, he goes, "What are we trying to conserve energy?" And, like, holy shit, there's just so much said in that line, right? It puts you, like, because we got to remember, we're in the early 80s, we're in Reagan era, where it's all, where money and rich people are the, like, obsession, and it's, like, really just laying bare. He says that was, like, just the mere idea that you would be conserving power is both A, ridiculous because we're rich, and B, something that's contemptible. And he literally just says that with his tone.
And it's crazy how much not a whole lot's changed here in 2023.
Well, yeah. This is a thing, you know, we really like had some good hating on rich people movies in the 80s, and like I feel like the youngsters need to go back and
yeah, I mean, that's definitely a theme I think that runs throughout this entire movie. I mean, it kind of ebbs and flows for different ones. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
That actor
actually, you know what? There's money is a big motivating factor for, you could argue, in each story.
Yeah.
In some sense.
And also, you can also say toxic masculinity in a lot of these, but that's probably most 80s media anyways.
Yeah, like in the early 80s, everything was toxic masculinity. I mean, I don't think anyone was trying to combat that back then.
Because like obviously the patriarch of this family was probably a piece of shit. So like we're rooting for his revenge on these other awful people, but like the sister is whatever. She's like doesn't seem like offensive per se. And same thing with her husband. Like they're not bad people. They're not the best people to hang out with, but like the fact that he's getting revenge on them is just kind of like scorch earth.
You know, this is definitely that EC Comics style of everyone is bad. Yeah, everyone is bad, and you can't really root for anybody but other than blood and guts. Like you're rooting for violence.
Yeah,
I'm rooting for the kid in the wraparound. That's what I'm rooting for in this.
Right
in this whole thing. Interesting thing too, Eric. You bring up the music in this, which is just fantastic. One of my favorite soundtracks of any horror movie ever. And John Harrison, really, he only did this. He did what, Day of the Dead? Right. I think he did Creepshow 2, and that was it.
He did like a handful. Yeah, so it's like
Tales from the Dark Side, I think.
He's a fascinating guy because, he then largely moved on, from what I understand, to direct and produce. Yeah. But like literally strolled in the room and was like, hey, here's two of the most banger ass horror soundtracks ever. Like Day of the Dead is, and this is funny, amazing. Is I was obsessed with Creepshow and Day of the Dead for 20 years soundtracks before I knew they were the same person. And then I was just fully obsessed. Like
I didn't even realize this till I bought the vinyl copies from Waxwork. That's when I realized it's the same person, like a year ago or 2
early
years.
2000s. I bought bootleg CDs at a convention with like crappy printed out paper sleeves. And that's how I figured it out. Same thing. Yeah. And awesome. But once you know that, there are a lot of through lines between the two soundtracks, but it is a soundtrack that it's not just like, if John Carpenter is an ambient composer, where John Carpenter just makes a vibe and then it sits under the mix. This is I'm sure there's more professional words, but it's like a reactive soundtrack.
Yeah.
Like
that's good.
Literally, and that's kind of the cool thing about going back and listening to it, is you start to associate each little individual, because there's 30 cues that only happen once in the movie because they were written specifically to a reaction or a murder or something happening. So
I'm just looking at his IMDb, and it says that the Father's Day suite or whatever you call it he composed has been used for a bunch of other shows and movies, including South Park.
Oh wow,
used that in the South Park episode.
That's crazy. And Jason, he actually directed a couple episodes of Tales.
Yeah, he did some. Actually, I have an interview with him about a year or so ago. He did some episodes of Tales. He actually has some I think short stories that he just released, like self published. So I'll definitely link those in the details. Obviously that end shot where the zombie comes out with a big platter with a woman's head with birthday candles and just say, "I got my cake." It's
iconic.
Yeah,
it's so goofy. And
if I would, let me put it this way, I would have a tattoo of this if I didn't have small children. Like I have horror tattoos, but that's one of like, I want it so bad, but I'm just like, I gotta wait.
Yeah.
I mean, just get Leslie Nielsen's face on you somewhere. I think that'd be iconic too.
I mean, yeah, dude, in that velour sweatsuit.
Yeah, we're gonna go there in a minute.
This is the dad.
Leslie Nielsen ensconced in velvet.
Mm-hmm. he basically had like the early 80s version of a drug rug.
Oh my god, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Like, do you think he has velvet underwear on underneath it?
I hope so.
Probably feels amazing.
I'm sure he's not wearing it.
This is the dad dilemma, though, of how far do you push it? Because like I have action figures all over my room, and I've had some that I've been like, I really want to get that, but it's too bloody for my small children right now, so I'm gonna have to wait on that one.
Yes. Yeah.
My child's 20. I have no constraints. I can do that.
I've been pushing it over time. I've got Chucky with half a face over here.
I have a Freddy Krueger stand-up in my living room.
That's amazing. I really like your Michael Myers banner too. That's pretty sweet.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
right, Jody.
Yesterday I had a conference call at work with someone higher up. I totally forgot to take that down, so I had like real fast. I had a real fast ad in the background on my screen because like, what's that banner? I was like, nope,
Did you get that from Knee High Horror?
Yeah.
Mondo turned me on to this place that makes like amazing pins and all kinds of other weird shit. But they're apparently so shady that when I bought stuff from them, PayPal was like, "Are you being ripped off right now?" I was like, "No, it's real."
Yeah, they're actually local based. So Nightmare Toys out here has a lot of their stuff in store, so you can just go pick it up.
Yeah, they're sweet.
All right, Jody, let's move on.
All right, our next segment.
By the way, is there a time limit, Jason? Because okay, gotcha. Good to know. Because I will make you run long.
Excellent.
You can just watch Jason's face and just see when he gets frustrated, and that's what
yeah. As long as we're on topic, I don't care.
Yeah, we never get off topic.
No, never.
The next segment is The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill. And again, super simple concept. You have this dim-witted backwoods guy, and a meteor lands near him, and it slowly starts to make grass grow all over him. And if he gets in water, it grows more, and he has to deal with becoming a plant man, and then finally blowing his own head off.
This is the one that I remember, like in the first segment I ever watched from Creepshow when I was younger. It scared the crap out of me. Just the thought process, or just the thought of having that happen to your body and the agony that you'd be going through, like, and then him killing himself at the end, like, gave me nightmares for a long time.
Yeah, it wasn't my favorite as a kid, but I've grown a much greater appreciation for it. It's such good body horror.
I was gonna say, this is probably the first body horror I ever watched.
Yeah. You know what? The most effective like little moment for me is when he licks his fingers and falls asleep and then wakes up and it's on his fingers and his tongue. That makes me want to die.
Yeah. God. I discovered
also he's watching old school, probably WWF, if I had to guess.
That's gonna ask.
From 82. Yeah, it was
some Samoans are in there, and like maybe Bob Backlund or something, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think it was Backlund. Yeah,
pretty sweet time capsule if you're into wrestling.
See,
when I was younger,
you have all these memories. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I found out there's a disease called like hairy tongue disease, and where your tongue grows hair, and that to me is like the worst thing that could ever happen to you. Because like like when it comes to food, I'm big on texture, and so like for him, like you said, with his tongue growing moss or vegetation, same here. Like that just like I wouldn't even wait for it to cover my body. I'd be like blowing. I'd be killing myself once my tongue got infected.
One thing I love about this episode, it wastes no time. Like literally the first frame is the meteor coming down. We don't get no backstory really. When we get backstory a little bit sprinkled through, but it just is right in there. And
so
of course,
you all are saying you remember all the body horror from being younger. I mean, my biggest impression of this as a kid was just Stephen King looking up and going, "Meteor shit," and like that got cemented in my brain.
In hindsight, there's something really interesting here. I can't watch old movies now, not in the frame of therapy. I think Mondo was saying that. Like, bro, just go to therapy. Like that. Like what you're getting an interesting look at. Like this character is like a sort of, I don't want to be offensive, like simple country folk who had a domineering father figure that then died, and it's like you feel he's alone and trying to be independent, but he is so just like moored to like shame, because like I mean that's all of what the flashbacks are about. It's all he screwed something up that he like couldn't have really understood was going to happen, right? He breaks the thing, and it's like then he just shame spirals, and then he's imagining this doctor this person at the college, right, who's like this person judging him and punishing him, and man, it's so interesting. And then like the father actually like, you feel Stephen King working some shit out here, I feel like, which is not maybe because of how it's a little of the goofier of all the stories because of the music, and Stephen King's like, you know, like, but there's something deeper there that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, his motivation is to basically sell this meteorite so that way he can feel like he's successful, and thus being successful, gain his father's,
make his father happy. And you talk about this was Stephen King's like out of his mind booze coke era. Well, Jordy Verrill's like an alcoholic. Like he's got booze. This was the movie that taught me what Ripple was, because eventually when the internet was around, I Googled it. I'm like, I need to know what this is. Like, what is Ripple?
I do think if it was if this is made in 2023, he'd have been on a computer covered in moss, blaming CNN and the Democrats.
Right. An indelible image for me is Stephen King, half covered in moss, pouring an entire bottle of vodka into a pitcher of orange juice, and then using the bottle to start to go like furiously, and then chugging it. Like, he's doing some pretty interesting physical acting that I think comes across.
Well, at least according to IMDb, he was told to act like Wile E. Coyote. Just go balls to the wall.
That is very interesting.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And like, it's interesting because it's actually like, if you played this straight, it would be like really horrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, it's horrifying. The concept is extremely horrifying.
You'd be in like Cronenberg land, which isn't always the most fun place to be.
Right. But you take a non-actor and tell him to go over the top, and it just kind of all somehow works.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it adds that comic styling, and that's perfect.
Yes.
Well, and it's that EC thing again. It's that comedy plus horror, and somehow makes the horror more horrible, even though it lightens it up in the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really Romero really understanding the tone that is needed for each of these.
And now that you brought up Wile E. Coyote, I'm bummed we didn't see Stephen King painting a realistic tunnel on the side of his house.
Another great moment to me that's just chef's kiss is when after he kills himself, we start backing out of his house slowly. I think it's like all crossfades, like and then it's like in the house and then the porch, and while that's happening, we see that everything is already covered on his farm and it's spreading. And also there's just the great, like there's a weather forecast in the background, I assume on the television, like morning news or something. And they're like, well, good news for farmers. It's going to rain all week. And it's like, I love that contrast of the peppy, happy weatherman saying something and just thinking that like impending doom will be on the way, you know?
And then we get the street sign that says like Portland this way, Castle Rock that way. So we're getting all the Stephen King
so that's
movies.
another thing from this movie that I've strongly considered getting tattooed is that wood sign that says like Castle Rock and Boston on it and stuff.
Yeah, that's
cool. Oh, that'd be cool. And a nice little deep cut there too.
Yeah. I like deep cuts. I don't like horror shirts that are like big name of the movie. I'm like, listen, I don't need to have talk to people. Like if they know what it is, great.
Right.
Know?
No, I don't mind those.
I like
if
a
the
horror
art's really
short.
Cool though.
I like a horror short that makes you, or a shirt that makes you work for it. Like if you're up by somebody and they recognize it, you're like, okay, we're on the same wavelength there because nobody else would know what this is.
Yeah, my favorite shirt I own is my Sutter Kane Rule shirt because it's total rip off of Monster Squad and In the Mouth of Madness, like two of my favorite movies of all time.
I love it.
Fantastic.
Does anyone else think that some of the plants that are growing look a little bit like weed plants?
No, Jason.
Interesting.
Get your mind out of the gutter.
You know what it reminds me of for some reason? I don't really have an explanation for it. Is like Fraggle Rock a little bit, and it's a little bit like the texture of the plants. You can see how they're sort of like fabric-y kind of.
You can see that. Okay, I could definitely see that. I also wonder in Creepshow too. It kind of reminds me of, like they had to have taken the raft from this, right? Where it's just a spreading ecological kind of disaster.
Possibly. All right. Jody, next.
All right. Next up is something to tide you over. You have a rich guy who finds out his wife is cheating on him, and he gets both her and the man who she's having an affair with, and buries them in the sand up to their neck, right where the tide's coming in. Puts a TV so that they can see each other, and they're not near each other on the beach, but they can see each other on the TVs, and they both drown, and then they come back and do the same thing to him. Again, very simple concept.
And again, waste no time whatsoever. We start with a knock on the door of the plant starting. Like we could have had like 10 minutes of like Leslie Nielsen's character figuring things out, but no, we go right to it.
I am so obsessed with Ted Danson's apartment in this movie.
Yeah.
It is I don't even know what you call it. I could try it, but I'd probably be wrong. Is it Art Deco? I don't know. Is it mid-century modern? But it's like wood paneling and shag carpets and weird shaped couches and some weird round looking fish tanks that are built into the wall, or I don't know. Like, I love it. I want to. No, he's got tile. He's got like big green, like probably asbestos filled tile in his living room.
So these were the kind of houses that as a kid I would see on movies and think, oh, that's what cool people. That's a cool house.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean Leslie Nielsen and Ted Danson, dude, and I mean she doesn't get to do much, but Gaylen Ross from Dawn of the Dead. Yeah. This is my second favorite one, definitely. Like,
Yeah, I agree.
Mhm.
Leslie Nielsen is just so much fun. The mind games, the atmosphere of like, I lived in New England for a while on and off, and like I love the beach, but there's something really neat when you live in a place where the beach always is, like going there at off times of year when there's nobody there and the atmosphere is different from kind of what your brain's expecting. Like the first time I saw snow falling over the ocean, I remember being like, well, I'll never forget that. That's insane.
Yeah.
That's what you get here. It's like fall feeling, either fall or spring, but it's like cold.
It's very overcast.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
just,
naturally people equate the beach with tropical climates or California or Hawaii, and not realizing that like that'd be like it'd be buried up to your neck.
And it's like
cold water rushing in over you.
You feel it so viscerally when you're watching it. It doesn't matter how many times you've seen it. Like, and Leslie Nielsen, it's so much of it is about him. First of all, he's really funny. Like the way he keeps going on about cleaning your VCR heads and like wire, you really ought to like dust this system off. Like I can relate to that kind of obsession, but also like, it's like he's ignoring Ted Danson, right? Like he doesn't care. Ted Danson's freaking out. He's like, you really ought to like clean these tape heads. It's another rich character who clearly feels he lives above regular rules and laws, who thinks of his wife as a possession that is his. You guys mentioned toxic masculinity, like that stuff is pretty interesting as well.
He's rich, so he can do whatever he wants, but the way he plays it, just matter of fact too, is pretty chilling. Like he's sitting here, he's killing these two people in the most horrific of ways, and then he goes home and he pours himself, takes, he turns on the TV, and then like he rushes to get himself a glass of liquor because he doesn't want to miss anything that's happening.
What do we think that drink is? Like a vodka soda? I've been wondering this for like 40 years. Like, what is that drink?
Gin. I was thinking straight gin.
That's what. But doesn't he mix it with like a little bit of like fizzy looking stuff or something? I feel like there's some like soda water in there.
But
he's got a velour, or it was probably velvet, honestly, like a full velvet 80s tracksuit thing, which like you mentioned, like, no, there's no way you're wearing underwear in that because it probably feels amazing. So why would you do that?
Everything just swinging free.
Leslie Nielsen just went on to have this career of just straight comedy, like one after another, or with Hot Shot movies and Repossessed and Dracula Dead Loving It, and even did the Scary Movie movies. So it's like, to me, he's always been this like big comedy actor, just so silly. And
he was also in WWF searching for the Undertaker.
Oh my god!
Like he started like with Forbidden Planet in the 50s and had this whole serious career before he turned comedy.
He played a lot of villains, and Creepshow is actually an interesting transition if you think about it, because it's both things. Like he's playing a villain, but he's funny as hell.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, this was right at that point where because he had made Airplane before this, so he had done some of the comedy stuff, but this was kind of the serious side of him with that comedic edge in there before he went, straight parody and spoof all the time.
One of my favorite moments in this is when the crab is walking around Ted Danson's head. First of all, you just feel that fear. Like it makes me uncomfortable just thinking about the idea of not being able to move my limbs, right? And then then Leslie Nielsen comes out and he's like, he makes some crack about how he's getting revenge for all his relatives you ate at the, some French restaurant or something. It's so good.
The other thing I will say is I kind of hate this one trope. It doesn't really take me out of it, but when someo's got a gun on you and they're making you dig your own grave or make you get in the hole,
just get at them.
Just shoot me,
or at least take your shot. Rush them with the thing.
You got a shovel.
Right?
Yeah, I'm not gonna dig my own grave and die exhausted. And then if I can get in the hole.
If Boss Rutan, Mondo, to talk your language, ever taught me anything, it's that on a gun you close the gap.
Yes.
You got to close the distance. With a knife, you run away. With a gun, you run towards.
That's our dad's advice.
I still no. Hold on.
I like to picture me saying that to my 4-year-old daughter going to daycare. Like, remember, run away from a knife. That's really funny.
If you ever watch a guy on Instagram called Detroit Dust, who for some reason always has an earpiece, he's never talking to anybody, and he shows self-defense techniques, and then half people will read the videos. And it's basically like a guy pointing a gun at someone, and he goes through the technique, and next you know he's in heaven. Like, what the fuck? Like, oh yeah, because that shit doesn't work in real life. If someone pulls a gun and you just give them what they want, like it's just you got 50 shot. But I'm not getting in that fucking hole.
I've always really wondered. I would love to see. I don't know if there's ever been a good behind the scenes doc on this, and I'm not really a big physical media guy these days, but I always wanted to see how they shot that thing with Ted Danson underwater. Like, there's the cool light. Like in the very last time we see him, the light lights up behind him, and his hair's floating, and like you can't move when you're in that. So I imagine it's like a shallow tank with somebody who's standing right by with a
respirator
air thingy. Yeah, but I don't know how actors do that crap.
That's pretty cool. There's a really he told a story years ago about how when they dressed him up like the grotesque zombie at the very end, that his daughter was on set. And his daughter was like 4 or 5, and so all he was doing was like, I can't let my daughter see me like this. I don't want to scare her. He goes, then she just runs right up to him. She goes, "Hi, Dad." Like, just was not phased with the zombie outfit at all.
It looks like they're both wearing about 50 pounds of rubber. They're very intense.
So uncomfortable. Yeah. Very, very cool. Very, very cool makeup though. Very, very cool effects.
Oh, but Eric, I do have good news for you. I thought that there was one. There is a documentary called Just Desserts, The Making of Creepshow, and it's streaming on Screenbox right now.
Jody, I'm not making this up. I just got chills.
Yeah, it exists.
Incredible.
Quick shout out to Screenbox too, because like they're
all kinds of good stuff on there lately.
Can one of you text me that, because I'm gonna forget by the end of the show.
We'll do.
That might be what I do right after this.
Eric, there's also a category on Screenbox called scares under 80 minutes.
Oh,
it's near and dear to my heart as well, sir. Like I love.
Another shout out to the sound work in this one, that because when they're zombies, their voices sound like they're still underwater, and that is such a cool effect.
It's so the line too, when he keeps saying, he pulls a gun on him, he goes, you can't kill what's already dead. And I was like, oh, such a good line.
If one thing can hold your breath, like they're just shouting at him. So good.
Oh, I love this.
So again, I was reading on DB, so take it all with a grain of salt. But supposedly they were going to do a different ending where he would call the cops to try to stop the zombies, and then the cops would show up, and the zombies would disappear. But then there's a shot where you see all these other videotapes he has, like in his bedroom, which I guess are other like snuff films that he's made.
I would imagine, yeah.
He gets arrested and put in the gas chamber, and the last shot is him saying, "I can hold my breath for a long time" while he's being gassed. That was like storyboarded, but I guess they decided to cut it down.
I like that, but it almost would have been too dark for this. Almost been too dark.
And it maybe sometimes the best answer is the simplest.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, the zombies getting direct revenge is probably
it makes better sense.
I gotta say, Leslie Nielsen, another incredible house. He has a sunken living room that I would kill someone for.
I love his house, and he had the wall that went up with all his VHS players there. Like, imagine, come on, it was so cool. I did love too when he finds the TV and he looks at the shredded cable and goes, "Oh, they must have been taken out by the sea." And I'm like, "Oh, we just know bad things. We know bad things are in store for you, sir."
I love that scene. Like the sun is setting. We see him. It's the first time we see him like a little off his game. Yeah. Like it's the first time he does not seem like supremely cool and confident. And so that's a pretty like good moment in the film, I think.
And the shots too they do of I love in old movies when they have the shots of the video cameras. When you just see the video cameras, because you're just waiting for something to happen in that video camera shot.
I love that the TV and the bucket are both half buried by sand. Yeah. Because it gives you such a feeling for the sort of like power of the ocean and the way the impermanence of that space, right? Like it's whatever it is when you're there today is not going to be, even if it looks the same to you, it's not the same that it was. It's turned itself over, you know?
All right, Jody, the crate.
All right. So this one's probably my favorite one.
I'm with you.
I agree.
Yeah. We get some great effects here with some creature work. So again, simple story. There is a janitor who wait, hang on. Okay. Sorry, I was catching my brain back up. You've got a professor at a college who gets a package from the Arctic expedition. Yeah. And there is a monster inside that package called Fluffy. Yeah. And then
they find the package underneath an old buried underneath basically an old stairwell at the college.
Right.
I love
And
that he
then-
finds it because he drops his quarter for the soda machine, and he wants.
There we
Yes.
go. That's where I was going with the janitor. I knew what I was. I knew I had something in mind, and then my brain got all scrambled.
I'm trying to give you the full Schnorr's experience here. We're getting interrupted.
Yeah, do it. Yeah, fix all of my synopses for me. And this professor has a terrible wife named Billy who constantly berates him, is just a mean, awful person. And the professor uses Fluffy to take care of her.
I will say that's my line. I'm not attracted to Adrienne Barbeau in this segment. In this segment specifically.
In this segment, she's so mean. Like she's
so mean it's not fun anymore.
No. It's not a fun mean. This is a bad mean.
This is how you know she's
we're not playing.
So this is how you know she's a trash person, right? So towards the end, when she comes back home and she finds a note that he wrote her to lure her into the college. First of all, she gets home and she pours herself like a glass of milk, and then pours
milk and scotch.
Yeah, whiskey right into the milk. But then she drives to the college, and then she still has the glass of scotch.
Oh, really?
She drove there with drinking the glass.
That used to be a big
milk.
like liquor and milk used to be a big thing.
Really? I've never heard of that.
My mom used to drink that exact thing she was drinking.
Oh my god! It made my stomach.
We're not gonna get deeper into that.
You know, this is a different Adrienne Barbeau than the one that you see in like The Fog, talking with her radio voice.
Oh my god, she's
that
so
Adrienne Barbeau is.
She's so warm and soothing in The Fog. I mean, it's a testament to her range. And here it's like she is a praying mantis. Like she is just so abrasive. Actually, okay, so we got to talk about this scene though in the beginning where I'm pretty sure that they edited the original recorded. Like I think this is ADR. Where she says, so she's being very abrasive at this college party. We're getting like, no one likes this woman. And she meets these new people in town who are new. The guy's a professor. She's the wife, whatever. And I can't remember the thing that leads up to it, but she's like, I know. Okay, never mind. I do know this verbatim. She goes, I told Parker if he'd just get his ashes hauled every once in a while, he wouldn't have to act like that. She says like Emily Vanderbilt she's like trying to search for a name. And then she goes, whoever that etiquette crotch is what the line is. 10,000% she said the other C word. And at some point it got dubbed over. Like you can see her mouth the other C word. And I just want a whole documentary just on what happened that day. Like what? Why did you decide to get rid of this? That's so interesting.
I think I brought it up on last week's podcast, but there was a episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia recently, and I was just in the hotel room and I was watching it. I love that show, and they just dropped the C word like 30 times on just network, not just cable TV. I'm like, I didn't know you could even do that.
I mean, the brilliance of this.
Apparently, the C word was too much for the Creepshow set.
Yeah, it's just fascinating.
That was the line.
But the FX is like it's game. Like, just do it.
The C word, Jesus Christ. The brilliance of the writing in this one is that you get pretty much all the context you need in like 3 minutes.
Oh yeah.
Just that opening scene is so well scripted. You know exactly who Henry is, what his relationship with his wife is like, his relationship with his best friend. You know, the best friend is kind of a womanizer. He has his first vision of killing his wife in this first scene.
Oh, I love that.
That's one of my favorite scenes in the whole Creep show because the guy looks at him after he's killed his wife and goes, "Good shot, old man."
That he's got that big ridiculous like I don't even know what kind of gun that is like, but an old timey Western kind of like a Magnum or something.
That's what's so great about it because in his mind that's like the gun that John Wayne would have or Clint Eastwood would have. Like he's gonna have the same gun.
And it's I struggle with this. Like not struggle is not the right word. Like I could definitely see someone watching this now and being like, boy, this is pretty problematic. This guy's like daydreaming about killing his wife. But I would, having lived a lot of life, I think that like in a relationship this toxic, it's pretty understandable for you to have feelings of anger and aggression like this. Like it definitely is visceral to see it played out in real life, even though it's fantasy, right? Like, but that's what we're here for, I guess.
And with this one too, it's not so much like that he is a violent person. It's that he is so beat down by this woman that he's running out of any kind of option for how to make his life better. And so when he starts having these fantasies, it's easy to go, okay, I get it. Like, I get why you would want to take Billy out.
Well, I'm looking at Adrienne Barbeau's filmography, and like I see the progression where the levels. So it's like The Fog, Escape from New York, and then The Crate. It's like that's like her range on there, and she's actually done a lot of great voice acting. So she was the computer in The Thing as like the only female character in that movie.
I'm not sure I knew that.
And then she was actually Catwoman in the Batman animated series in the 90s. And she's done a bunch of other like voice acting. So she really knows how to use her voice. And yeah, she really gets to your soul in this episode.
There's even in this one, I would say too, there are some thoughts about money and class. Like in particular, the banter and stuff between the janitor and the professor. Like you can feel the human hierarchy of who's above who by just the way they speak to each other. And they're both very nice to each other, but you almost feel like you're watching aliens communicate with each other, right? Like they are just, they could not live in different worlds. And the janitor, like he says, like he dug it out and called the professor because he thinks there might be something in there that's worth money, basically.
Right.
And that's motivating him. So like, even though this is the one with maybe the least money centric tide, like it's still in there. There's still some stuff going on with class and that kind of thing.
Yeah, like why does this professor call the cops or something immediately? Why is he
right?
He has all the evidence right there, but he doesn't consider that human life to be enough to authorities over.
I think it's also you assume that the cops is a monster. Like you're going to call the cops, hey, this monster killed these two people, and he's got blood on you. Like, let's be honest, dude, they're not gonna.
He's got the monster trap. That's not going anywhere.
I think this one has the most atmosphere for me of all of them. I think maybe To Tide You Over is probably in the running for that, but like simple little writing things like saying, "Oh, Charlie, he's working in the basement. There's no air conditioning. It's August, right?" That those little things kind of put you in a place and a feeling. My favorite moment is, and I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but like Hal Holbrook's monologue at the end, he says this line that this is my favorite line in like cinema history, honestly. And you're gonna be like, what? But he says, the timing couldn't have been more perfect. He's like, all of the students left 2 weeks ago and school doesn't start for another week or whatever, however he says it. I just don't know that there's been other lines in movies that fully place to me in a time and place than that line. And he delivers it so well. And it's over this montage, right? After we've just seen the finale. So it's just, I don't know. It always stuck with me.
Well, then watching it again, when you notice that he drugs his friend so he'll sleep, so he won't go to the cops, so he'll have time not to go to the cops.
To go do it, right?
Yeah, it just adds like another level of nefarious.
I love that actor. The dude's slamming drinks with him, and he's like, "I'm blasted out of my gourd," but he says it in like the fanciest, most English professor way possible.
Now, to be a little bit of a contrarian, this is the one that drags a little bit for me. There's a little bit of the back and forth.
That's so interesting.
And like the one where he gets the other student killed, or whoever the other, like the associate professor, like this one doesn't move as well as the others. And that's purely my opinion, but compared to how swiftly the other ones go,
that's interesting.
But the performances definitely make up for it.
I mean, Hal Holbrook's amazing, and I haven't actually seen him in that much stuff. I remember catching him in he was
recently in Sons of Anarchy. He played.
Was he really?
He only passed away 2 years ago.
Gemma's dad, who was dying of dementia, and was fantastic in it.
Well, I know his big thing was like he played Mark Twain on Broadway for like 50 years or something. Like,
I didn't know that.
He did a one man, like, I'm Mark Twain and I'm one man, like that's it. And he did that. That was his like legacy, that role.
Well, and then he was in All the President's Men. He was in The Fog, and then he's just like so much TV.
Okay, he was in a movie in the 70s. Capricorn 1 is the name of it. O.J. Simpson is in it, and it's basically in a world where all of the moon landings have been faked, and now they're trying to do it for real. There's something about those lines, but he's like the team leader. It's really good.
Yeah, he was also
as a kid who grew up watching too much 80s TV, he was also on Designing Women a lot.
Yeah.
Into it.
He was this again, watched way too much TV. He his character dated Julia Sugarbaker's character, and in real life he was married to Dixie Carter, who played that character. And so that was his real life wife, who he was acting off on Designing Women.
Dixie Carter, huh? Good for him.
Designing Women and Golden Girls. That's my childhood.
And then he was on episode of The Sopranos and The West Wing. So he was just all over the place.
I can remember as a child in the 90s at this point telling people Hal Holbrook was my favorite actor, and to just blank stares. Like
why?
That just sums me up as a kid, if you need to know. I think the score really shines here. And this has this one track in it when Hal Holbrook starts setting his trap for Adrienne Barbeau. He's cleaning up the mess. He writes her the note. Then we see her come home. This score kicks in that's like this rolling, intensifying piano riff that is just gorgeous and just creates the best atmosphere for the scene. It makes it so intense a scene to just live in. That's when we see her drinking her weird milk liquor and laughing. She is so delighted that his friend is in trouble. Like you've never seen anyone happier than this woman finding out that Hal Holbrook's friend beat a co-ed and she's hiding under the stairs,
but potentially to death. Like
she is like tickled. Like she's so happy because it puts her in a position of power like that. And Henry, again, like he knows how she views him, and he plays into that to manipulate her to come to the school. And that's just like, man, that's just good writing.
And I like that she doesn't have any kind of like reason for being this way. She just is this way. This is who she is.
It's never
She's
given
a terrible
to us.
Person.
We just enter their lives, and this is the state of it, right?
But we've also known someone that might not be as bad as this, but is like within that realm of just like, this is just not an awful person.
Negative and
so she goes there and meets him, and it's so good. He's so fun. He's stifling laughter while he's trying to tell her the story, and it's so funny because he knows what he's doing and she doesn't, and she's like, are you insane? Like, have you cracked up? And he's just like, you'll see. And he like throws her into the stairs, and then he starts giving her the what for. He finally unloads on her, like everything emotionally that he's been holding in. He just like unloads it all, and you're just, the tension is building and you're waiting for this thing to jump out. And then they do this brilliant thing where it's like the tide falls and it's silence, and the thing doesn't come out. And she's like, what is wrong? And then she just chops him down, like in the most absolute brutal way, leading up to and through, like calling out his manhood, like, and like sexual prowess. And that's where, it's so interesting. I was just listening to Plug It Up, and Elizabeth was on, and they were talking about the birds, and they were talking about this idea of this connection between the birds and sort of the emotional state of the women in the film, which was really brilliant. Like I had never thought of that before. And I'm just for the first time feeling like there's something there between Henry and the monster.
So it's like
because like it takes her to like fully tear him down for that monster to finally come out. And there's always this moment, again, like the things in this movie that I wondered about for 30 years, where the monster pops out, and it's great because the monster is ridiculous. Like it's scary, but it's very cartoony. It's got big cartoony werewolf eyes. And the monster like grabs her and then looks at him and he says something. And I am always like, is he saying like, you're welcome? Like there's some kind of connection there between him and the monster for a second, where he's like, I got you, bro. Or like, fine, I'll just fucking kill her. Fine.
He just high-fives him.
Her. She's so over the top. She's like, she's like silent movie acting, screaming. All the lights go red. I mean, man, the end of that segment is so electric and brilliant.
You can almost equate it kind of like the monster doesn't come out because he's in a good spot. He's happy. He thinks he's about to kill his wife, who he hates. So the monster's like, oh, he's in a good mood. Why am I going to pop out? And then the minute she attacks him and his rage comes through, now he's angry. That's when the monster attacks.
Well, and you can also, I think about it maybe in terms of Henry's own strength and power. Like he's trying so hard to like fight back against her, and he just doesn't have it in him. And like you could make a tie, I feel like, between like that monster getting up and like Henry finally awakening within himself and like embracing his identity and his power. And then that monster just eats the crap out of her.
Yeah. And then gets away.
And then the brilliant scene, like there's so much tension, it's dead quiet after that. The sound drops out. Such brilliant use of sound in this movie. The sound disappears, and then he's slowly trying to eke like a lock into the chain. And then that's when that monologue kicks in. That's so good. And then go ahead.
No, so I always love too that like you have this giant monster from the 1800s that has survived in this crate, but that crate had to smell really bad too, because there's probably so much poop. There's definitely a lot of poop in that crate.
I mean, in the modern days, and again, like I want to acknowledge nostalgia, and like I think we judge older movies differently than newer movies. Yeah. If I saw this now, I'd be like, yo, that monster's not alive after 300, 200, whatever.
No, but I do think it's always really cool. It's like this monster's destroying all these things, has great power, but this lock.
I got that. This ancient lock. Yeah. I love however they achieved the effect of the cliff that he drops him off. It kind of looks like a matte painting. It looks like there's some kind of camera trickery going on there, but the result is it feels larger than life in a comic book way.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Then we end with the very last bit of the monster finally getting out. So it's like, we thought we were safe with that tiny little lock, and then nope, it's out there.
I like how throughout this movie, while there are some like realistic moments, it's always got this kind of hyper realistic feel to it that goes, into that comic booky realm with the matte paintings and
hyper realistic reactions.
It's over the top, but not in a goofy way. Like her scream, where she goes into full silence, and the lights and everything. But it works. It works for this whole thing.
Yeah. And I just in love with this final shot of him. Like what we see that the monologue is actually, we know like he's talking to his friend. It's just we're seeing different pictures. And then they're sitting there playing chess, and they're playing chess both literally and figuratively, because there's some sparring, like subtle verbal sparring where it's like, how do you know I didn't call the police? And he's like, you didn't. I didn't do anything. And he's like, yeah, no, you didn't. I don't know. You didn't do anything at all.
Yeah, now I'm wondering if like
that
Bryan
scene is the best.
Yeah, I'm wondering if Bryan Singer like stole that scene for the first X-Men movie.
I mean, listen, two people like
playing chess, but
playing mental chess while playing chess. It's not the biggest leap in the world. It's just, I love the way Professor Dude is slunk down his chair. Henry, meanwhile, has had a shower. He is wearing a velvet like golf shirt tucked in, looks spry as ever, just ready to embrace life. And the difference in body language is so good, and the camera slowly pans out and it's great.
All right,
I take it back. This movie's perfect. Not nostalgia.
All right, our last segment. And this is the one I actually remember the most seeing as a kid. I feel like maybe I caught it on network TV too. We have a rich man who has this like hermetically sealed apartment because he's obsessed with cleanliness, and bugs start to come in. I think the reason why I remember this one so much is because it icked me out more than anything else. I hate cockroaches in particular. And so
I've read some crazy stories about the cockroaches on set and the wranglers and stuff. Like I swear I read somewhere that every one of those roaches, like you can't get them back once you let them out, basically, that like they're going to just disappear.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And that was
down that set.
I could be making that up, but it sounds good. So I swear I read something like that like there was an issue with the cockroaches.
Well, that was the most expensive part of the whole movie. And I think they used like 25,000.
Oh,
like, and this is why, like, as good as CGI can be, They'll never get that feeling.
Totally, man. So this guy, who would you call this guy? Is this like a Howard Hughes kind of character? Would that be the?
That's definitely what they're playing off of.
Yeah.
Right. He's rich beyond anyone's imagination. In his $3,400 a month New York City penthouse apartment, which always makes me want to kill myself. And but he's terrified of germs. Like he's complaining. He's super racist. And complaining to people about the bugs in his apartment and the germs and blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, we watch a slow invasion of his world. This is disgusting. It's really gross. If you have trouble with cockroaches, which I do too. I didn't grow up like Jody. I don't know your experience, but I never really thought about this until I met Elizabeth. But she grew up in the South and is just pretty nonplussed as you can be by cockroaches. We don't really have, if you have roaches up here in the North, it's because you're dirty. So I didn't really ever have that experience. I've probably seen one in real life, a legit live roach, twice.
Well, I never was around them as a kid, but in our first apartment that we lived in, cheap newlywed apartment type stuff, roaches would get in from the neighbors, and they always have just disturbed me because it felt dirty. That's what it roaches
again, so much of it is social stigma. 100%.
Roaches represent dirty, and especially in this segment, his whole house is this white,
hermetically sealed,
clean
thing. Yeah.
And so every little bit of that getting in just feels almost like corruption getting into his world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could definitely argue the whole thing is not real, that the whole thing is more about him cracking up, right?
Up until that last shot.
Well. I think you could still debate it, but I take your point. Yeah.
Right.
Well, one of the most disgusting thing in this is when he's something about him pouring his flakes into the food processor. He's not paying attention, and you can fully just see them coming out of the box. I have a lot of dietary restrictions now, so I eat largely fresh fruits, things that don't really come in packages, but I used to all the time, and that was always a huge fear. I don't think I've ever poured a box of cereal without feeling a momentary feeling of anxiety of what's going on in there. You know what I mean?
We dealt with the beauty of pantry moths about years back. If you guys know what those are.
No.
All it takes is you go and you buy, let's say you buy some grain from the store and it has
and there's some worms in it.
But they turn to moths, and then it gets into everything you own. We had to throw away basically everything in our cabinets, and we discovered eggs. I think we're using sesame seeds, and we poured out sesame. Why is that sesame seed moving? I think that I had skin crawl when I saw that.
I've had that happen with flour.
I think I had some similar things happen in my first baby apartment back in the day that I've just blocked out. But now when you're saying that, I'm having feelings over here.
We never dealt with roaches here, but you will find out here in the desert, if you in our apartment that we were by the pool, and you get water bugs, which look like roaches.
Those are
but
gross.
they'll get in there, and they look like roaches, and they're just disgusting.
The scariest thing I get here in my house is earwigs, which are horrifying, to be fair.
I hate those too.
They're not cool.
Yeah, just talking about this segment it's squirm inducing. The entire segment gives me.
So the rest of that scene, so he pours the flakes, and he's not even paying attention because he's preoccupied by this hostile corporate takeover that he's delighted by, and this dude who killed himself that he's very happy about. And he's food processing, and then we see him with his little Rubbermaid thing pulling it out, and you can clearly see bug guts. And I can't remember. I think he sees it right when he goes to eat it or something. Oh God, it's so disgusting.
Yeah, then he pours out the cereal or mixture or whatever,
and he sees them
in there. Oh, yeah. No, I've lived in an apartment, and we got roaches from someone, and then it's a huge pain. And again, this is probably the most obvious classism episode.
Yeah.
Because he's it's the middle of the night, and he's demanding that if his superintendent, who isn't even working, who's on vacation at Disneyland, doesn't get someone there in half an hour, he's gonna have him fired.
Well, there's a lot going on here too. I think you could make the argument that to him, these people that he is speaking to are the roaches. They're one and the same, right? There's also we really intensely see how isolated he is. There's a power in this one to the fact that he only hears people in disembodied voices.
Mm-hmm.
Even the maintenance guy, when he drops by, puts his mouth right up to the thing, so we don't even see his eyes. Like we're not even seeing his full face, right? Yeah. So there's definitely some layers to it.
Yeah, this might be the most Romero episode segment, like straight Romero. Like I wouldn't be surprised if he had more to write on this than King did.
I love the visual. I love the visual touch of the jukebox.
Yeah,
which is like kind of the only color.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
he looks like he's in like 2001 or something. Like in he looks like he's like in a Kubrick futuristic sci-fi movie.
And that stands out. And that sanitary white color works so perfect with the color of the roaches. It just amplifies that much more. So at the end, when you see that room filling up with roaches, it makes my skin crawl to this day.
Honestly, the hero of this one is the maintenance guy because of the way he kind of just gleefully mocks him. Honestly, like he's mocking him with like over the top kindness, and it's kind of the only catharsis you get until the end, obviously, but. You know, because like the wife of the deceased business guy, she obviously gives it to him pretty good, but he's just nonplussed and she's anguished. So you're not, you don't necessarily enjoy that.
Right. And then we get that final bit where he's just his body just explodes. I can't think of any better way. Just erupts.
Yeah.
It's just like, whoa. And again, that they're not faking that. I mean, obviously it's a dummy, but they're not faking the cockroaches, and that just
the big ones are called I wish I could remember where I read this, but they're called Madagascar hissing cockroaches or something. Yes.
People carry those as pets, or people.
Those are like the only ones that get that big, apparently. But if you want, I mean, there's like many different varieties. Like they got them all. They got all the lineup here.
This is like Indiana Jones, Ray Lost Ark snake scene, which snakes are my thing. Snakes freak me out.
Or Temple of Doom.
I don't like, but like Temple of Doom,
real buggy and gross.
But yeah, it's like just so much.
And this is another one of those that this whole movie does so good at making reprehensible characters, but then the punishment that happens to this guy is so bad that even like I don't feel sorry for him because he's awful, but it's still bad. It's still bad to watch.
Like you suck, I may take it too far.
I always say this when a movie puts you in a character's perspective, in some ways it doesn't matter how bad they are. You feel something. I'm not saying you like rooting for them, but whatever. The film is actively putting you in their shoes, like,
No, I want him. I don't want
to have cockroaches burst out of my body, and so I can relate to that part of it.
Like I want him to be punished horribly, but I'm like, that seems a bit much.
But also, but think about this: like in each of these stories, now I'm thinking, not all of them. In some of them, at the end, everyone is dead.
Mm-hmm.
And what that does is leave you, the viewer, with the monster. And that's, I think, partially why that can be scary.
Yeah.
In this case, 10 billion cockroaches.
And God forbid them bursting out of his body. Like he was already dead when that happened. Like how does
his chest, like right in that Kevin Bacon Friday the 13th spot where the arrow comes out, his chest just so, and the dummy doesn't even look that good.
No.
But it's only on screen for a second, and it's again like just the fact that it's real gives it weight, even if it doesn't, it's not a perfect match.
Your focus isn't the dummy. And like if they made this nowadays, it'd be so CGI that the whole thing would look fake and wouldn't have any visceral effect whatsoever.
I mean, what movie magic that like they had to pay cockroach wranglers, basically. Like they had to pay people to source cockroaches.
Who has that job? Like, do you grow up one day and be like, I just want to wrangle cockroaches?
Again, according to IMDb, the American Museum of Natural History.
Okay, I guess that makes sense.
Had apparently a lot of cockroaches to hand over. I think they did it for like 50 cents a piece or something.
That's pretty expensive. There's a lot.
How you count that, but
there's a lot.
I wonder if they have any
by weight, by volume.
Maybe by volume, yeah. That's insane.
And it's interesting. I'm less attached to this one because I never saw it that really as a kid. Like maybe once or twice it came on, but I really remember years later being like, oh yeah, there's another thing here. Because I guess when you chop it off and add commercials, then it's a clean 2 hours, probably is what it was.
I vividly remember the very, very last scene watching it when I was younger, because I think we probably rented it from somewhere, but then I couldn't remember for years like where that came from. I saw it and I was so young. And then finally, when I got probably middle school age or in high school and rented it for myself and watched it again, I got to watch this again. I was like, oh, that's where it's from.
When you say the last scene, do you mean the bugs or the wraparound?
Yes. Oh, the bugs. The bugs.
Yeah. All right, Jody, Bring us home.
Yeah, the final wraparound, the garbage collectors find this comic book in the trash can, and they browse through it a little bit and see an advertisement for a voodoo doll. And then inside the house, you see the horrible dad who threw it away, complaining about having a stiff neck. And you see upstairs the little boy has sent off for that voodoo doll, and he's stabbing it right there in the neck, getting some revenge on his.
Some more cool voice work. They make his voice sound really low and creepy.
Yeah.
I do want to step back for a second. Did we skip the interlude where Tom Atkins takes the comic book? Because
I thought that's in the beginning. But that's like
I can't remember. Is there not a middle one? Maybe not. So I forgot my favorite line in the beginning then, which is at least it's not like those books you keep in your sock drawer under your underwear.
Yeah.
Those sex books. And then he backhands them. Oh God, I would kill to see what kind of porn 1982 Tom Atkins had in the top drawer of his dresser.
Oh, good Lord.
I bet there's a lot of hair.
Yeah. Hey, man.
And then, of course, the little boy is played by Stephen King's son, Joe Hill. Just to make it even more in the family.
I don't think I ever noticed that.
I love the wife, the woman who plays Tom Atkins' wife is such a good actress at playing this sort of like, we don't see him physically hit her, but we could assume that has happened before. But her she's so meek and like deferent to him. I wonder how this tracks in 1982. Like, this is a fully abusive father, right? Like, do people know that in 1982, or are they just like, hey, it's just like my dad? I don't really know the answer to that, but she's so good, and I love her in the scene. He's like, oh God, and she's like, oh, you old bear, do you want some Bengay?
Yeah.
Oh, I just love that line. She's ironing his shirt in the kitchen. It's very like Family Ties, but with abuse.
Yeah. Family Ties with abuse.
It somehow reminded me of the family dynamic in Nightmare on Elm Street 2. That's what reminded me of.
Yeah.
I was also thinking about Glenn's dad in Nightmare on Elm Street 1, where like, he cuts off he just takes the phone off the hook.
Yeah. And that, I mean, all that to tie into the theme of your guys' show, like the transgressive nature of the idea of like, first of all, he doesn't want him having these kind of comic books. I mean, that's ripped right from the history of EC Comics. But also, it also, in a cheeky way, like confirms the parents' worst fears, right? That like the comic book sort of did turn him to violence because it got him this voodoo doll. So that there's an interesting kind of subversion there,
which he wouldn't need if the father wasn't such a piece of shit. So
right, there's it. Right. It shows both sides of it, right?
Yeah.
Well, because they also make it a point too at the end with the garbage collectors. They're looking through like, oh, X-ray glasses, those won't work, all that, and the only thing that he sent away for was that voodoo doll.
Right. Like, so it's like, so that actually tracks with all the other segments where it's like Tom Atkins is a piece of shit. But this is just so on the nose here. Like the kid literally gets revenge with the comic book itself.
Yep.
Yes.
That he took away.
So like,
I think there's something about EC Comics too, that the idea that it could corrupt you and make you into a little psycho is actually a good thing. Like that's part of the fun of it is, these are messed up.
Yeah. And I imagine one of the cool things is probably seeing this in 1982, maybe as someone who maybe grew up on EC Comics. I bet that wraparound was maybe a snapshot of something that happened in a lot of people's lives when they're young, because I'm sure a lot of parents were taking away EC Comics from kids.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right. And then they've got this like wish fulfillment of weaponizing something from the comic.
Right. Well, because as a kid, you feel helpless, especially when you live in a house like this, right?
Well,
and so the comic gives him his power back.
And at the same time, I'm sure there's commentary on the government weaponizing the fear of EC Comics to their own means, like McCarthyism, etc., to get control and power.
So
If you're like me and you love all those like mail order stuff from comic books back in the day, there's a really great book you can get called Mail Order Mysteries. And all it does is document those and with the person who's actually bought a lot of the stuff and tested it out.
I love that.
Well, that's cool.
The only thing I ever did was order sea monkeys that like never really lived.
Yeah, me too.
And then was like, well, that was depressing. We're not doing that again. I'm very obsessed with Tom Savini and whoever this other dude is as the most 1980s ass garbage man you've ever seen. Like, they literally have like longshoreman hats on and like long johns. I don't know why it's not winter, but I don't know. Like, everything about them is wonderful.
Yeah, the other guy is named Marty Schiff. He was kind of a producer, friend of George Romero. He played a motorcycle rider in Dawn of the Dead. So a lot of the people in this were like
Savini did too, obviously.
Yeah, with Savini. So there's a lot of the smaller actors in this are probably friends or just like part of George A. Romero's troupe of just regulars he would throw in stuff.
I love, like, he hits the garbage truck and yells at it to chew its food before it swallows. It's like, you're operating the truck, friend.
So that would be a great like wraparound for another anthology of just two garbage men like picking up garbage from people and just seeing what they're disposing of.
There is a great documentary. I think it's called Scream Greats or something from the 80s. It's Tom Savini. It's all about Tom Savini's early career, but it was made in the 80s. And there's a bunch of behind the scenes shots from Creepshow. I don't know that there's much narrative to it as much as it is behind the scenes stuff. And there is stuff from Dawn of the Dead, and I had him sign a bootleg of it 20 years ago at a convention. Cool. He was cool. I mean, he'll pretty much sign anything if you pay him. He doesn't really care. But I did say, I almost went to your school, and he said, almost isn't good enough. And I was like, cool. And remember that forever. Thanks. Later.
I did ask him for a BGH bumper once. And he just looked at me and said, why?
Yeah. And he did it though, because we use it sometimes. It's so funny. Yeah. He sounds so nonplussed. I love it.
Yeah.
If you have $20, I'll do anything. Like,
yeah, it's interesting. He did the effects here, and like, he probably would have come right off The Burning, I would guess, because The Burning was 81. I mean, I'm sure he had a bunch of stuff in the air at the same time, but man, what a like Friday the 13th to The Burning to this to the thing. He did the thing? No, that was K&B.
Yeah.
Or those guys before they were that.
Looking that up, but yeah. So okay, let's wrap up a little bit. So let's talk overall thoughts and your favorite segments. Eric, go.
This movie is perfect and unimpeachable. No, I have no idea what a modern person would think of this movie, and I don't want them to tell me. My favorite is The Crate, as discussed, with Something to Tide You Over being a close second. My least favorite is, like I said, I've come around on Jordy Verrill, so it might be the last one, but the last one, again, I think it's like a perfect kind of denouement to the whole thing. Like, it's just a quirky little thing with a great explosive ending, literally, and it works for it. But yeah, that's my favorites.
All right, Jody, and have your kids watched this?
I've watched it with a couple of them, and they did like it. But yeah, I'm tracking right here with Eric on this one. That my favorite is The Crate, and then the one with Leslie Nielsen. But yeah, Jordy Verrill was always one that was sillier than the other ones, and so maybe I didn't give it enough appreciation. But on more adult viewings of this one, I do like that one too. I really, there's not a bad segment.
No, not
it's not like one of those anthologies where there's some real stinkers thrown into the middle to just kind of hide them. Like, they're all good in their own way. But yeah, The Crate is the one that really has always stood out for me, mainly just because Hal Holbrook and Adrienne Barbeau more than anything else.
Mondo.
Yeah, I'm right in line with you guys. My least favorite's probably They're Creeping Up on You, because as much as I love the last shot, the shot with the bugs overall, probably my least favorite, but that's not like whatever. Like, it's still awesome. It just happens to be my least favorite on this one. But yeah, The Crate to me is just perfect. And I do think you could show this to, I think any modern horror fan that maybe, I don't know, like I'd be really hard pressed to think someone would watch this and wouldn't like it. That might be something I just don't want in my life.
Right.
because it still has so much. It's still really fun. Like in the, like I said, and you mentioned the use of sound, the use of color, and the use of how they have those the comic book look interspersed. All that's so creative.
In a world where every movie is teal and orange now, it is so refreshing to watch a movie like that is just bursting with color.
Yeah,
well, and it gives it kind of a timeless quality too. This was
Yeah.
made in the early '80s, but it doesn't. I mean, there are things that definitely feel '80s. Those houses, and the decorations and the velvet suits, but it has that comic book timelessness to it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff from the early '80s, late '70s that we definitely look through with rose-colored glasses.
Sure.
I'm looking at you, Amityville Horror. You suck. But
Amityville sucks.
It's
Yeah,
terrible. It's terrible. It was like the remake was better. But something like this, I think, does stand the test of time, and it will, because it's. I mean, I think you can show us to anybody, and if they don't enjoy it, like, there's something wrong with them.
All right. My favorite is Something to Tide You Over, and then probably Lonesome Death of Jordy, and probably then The Crate. I just seeing Ted Danson and Leslie Nielsen going at it, and just again before, like, in Ted Danson before, like, he's cheers Ted Danson, Leslie Nielsen when he's still like sinister Leslie Nielsen, and just the visceral idea of being stuck in that water and just like you can smell and taste the seawater. The saltiness is just very, and again, seeing at a younger age without seeing the revenge part really kind of imprinted on my brain. And then something about the silliness, but then the dire situation of Jordy situation just really speaks to me. But again, we're just splitting hairs really, because all these are fantastic. Perfectly directed, perfectly written. The score is amazing. Like, everyone, not all the actors knocking out of the park. Like, I don't know if I can say that yet, but I watched this with my son, who's 17, over the last 2 nights. He thought it was okay. I could tell he wasn't like, he was into it, but he wasn't over the moon or anything. And I think it might be losing a little of its veneer with a more modern audience. I just don't think he has the appreciation for some of it. I mean, like,
I do wonder, though, because he's young, so I do wonder, like, in 5 or 6 years, if he'd look at it differently. Because I think one thing too, I know my daughter does it sometimes with movies that are older like this. If it doesn't immediately grasp her attention span, it's like onto the phone, onto something else. And I do think that is I'm not saying an issue with younger people. It's just how the world is nowadays. So I do kind of wonder, as people get a little bit older, I think I bet he has a better appreciation for it.
Yeah, and he's still like growing and as a horror fan, because we watched Happy Death Day the other night and he loved it. He thought it was great. So he has appreciation. He's got taste. This didn't like bite him. This thing grabbed him very strong. But this is definitely like should be the template, or at least like there's so many lessons to learn about how to do a good horror anthology. It's like cut out as much fat as possible. Go big. There's no reason to like hold anything back. We only have 20 minutes a segment. Each one needs to find a way to stand out. Again, the splashes of color, the lighting and everything. You don't need no big fancy effects. Keep it simple. I mean, this is a classic for a reason.
Yeah, and there's definitely a theme, right? Everything. I mean, obviously, it's completely different stories, but like I said, like the color palettes and then the sound, all that, it all blends it all together and makes it feel very cohesive. Which a lot of anthologies don't do that. A lot of anthologies feel like it's just, hey, we had one good story, and then we have these other stories that we found.
So the thing now is, I think a lot of anthologies are just a bunch of short movies smashed together, or they give a bunch of disparate filmmakers the same amount of money, go make something, and it's like, I mean, it never feels as cohesive as this,
right?
Well, including the Creepshow series they did on Shudder, the first season anyway.
Yeah,
like there was just no style, there was no music to it. And then when I tell you that I wrote them a thesis on what they were doing wrong, because they sent me an email with it one day and they're like, it was like an automated email, like, hey, we noticed you watched Creepshow. Do you have any feedback for season 2? And I was like, let's do this. I'll take. Well, I like called work and was like, I can't come in today.
Well, and yeah, even with the show, like there were occasional segments that were just absolute bangers, but only occasionally. Like it wasn't as consistent by any means. Yeah, that Evil Dead one, the NPR kind of, or like public access TV Evil Dead thing. I really love that one.
Well, the irony is, like, I actually don't really like anthologies that much, and part of it is like I have this thing on such a high pedestal, just nothing lives up to it.
Yeah,
I for the most part do enjoy anthologies. The problem is most of them just aren't very good. Just most of them aren't.
I
good.
do, since I won't get to be on your other anthology shows. I do enjoy Tales from the Dark Side, 1990. That one's pretty good. And I have a weird soft spot for Tales from the Dark Side, the syndicated television show, which is just epic levels of 80s schlock. Like the idea that you could just randomly find that on like a Saturday afternoon on like a UHF channel, that's my happy place.
Oh, I miss those. There's a lot of stuff I do miss about those days.
Searching around the dial on the UHF, like what's kind of weird indie TV shit is out here.
We had a local channel that had if you guys have ever heard of Count's Customs, he's got a TV show on Discovery Channel. He used to be, when I grew up in Las Vegas, he was Count Cool Rider, the motorcycle riding vampire horror host that would have on Channel 6 or Channel 33 would do that in midday. You get a block of Twilight Zone, Tales from the Dark Side, and then whatever public domain movies he was showing. It was a good time to be a kid.
Nice.
So before we move off Creepshow real quick, Eric, what are your thoughts on Creepshow 2?
I love Creepshow 2. I don't think it's as good. I think that Creepshow 2, again, doesn't really follow the formula. I think that first segment is kind of weak, although it does have a great ending. That you want to talk about something boring that's boring to sit through, waiting for that first segment to come through. We also have problematic white actors playing Native Americans. Do you know who that main, I'm air quoting, Native American guy in the first thing of Creepshow with the long hair? He's like, oh, I'm going to go to Hollywood, whatever. Do you know who that guy is?
Not off the top of my head.
That is the guy from that Netflix show about the FBI profilers, Mindhunter.
Mindhunters?
That dude.
No way.
The older guy.
Huh.
Once you see it, you will never unsee it. Yeah, that guy white, by the way. No, but The Raft is incredible. Again, like I like things that put me in a time and a space. Like when I think The Raft, I think, okay, it's fall. I'm chilly. We're going swimming. Like I feel it, you know? And then the third one is fantastic. The woman who is cheating on her husband and hits the hitchhiker. It's just so good.
We won't talk about Creepshow.
I'm also really into that lady, but I feel like that's a little less crazy than the mom in the first segment here.
All right, Mondo, give us your
She's meant to be attractive in that movie, is what I'm saying.
All right, Mondo, give us your song of the day.
All right, so I'm gonna be pretty on the nose. I was kind of trying to think like, what can I do for Creepshow? And I happen to find this band out of Chicago that calls themselves Creepshow. And they call their style blackened synth thrash. And I listened to it, I'm like, this is pretty damn good. And I'll be sending you $5 on Bandcamp for this album. And so the song I'm going to pick, which I love it, the album title is called Wicked Tome, featuring Professor Pizza. Their album, Creepshow. And I would tell you, just look up the album art cover, because the album art cover is like a love letter to just 80s cheesy schlock movie.
You will occasionally send me bands similar to, I haven't heard it, but like the mixing of metal and synth. It's not stuff I like seek out, but as someone who's very into synth music, I find it fascinating.
Wow, that is a cover. That is a cool cover. I just looked it up.
This band is more metal than they are synth, but they're using some of the synth stuff in the background. There is a really cool, but what's funny is a lot of metalheads got angry. There's a band called Fulci, obviously based off Lucio Fulci, and their last record, the first half is just their style of slam death metal. The second half is 100% synth, 100% like Italian movie score synth, and it's fantastic. But there's three different groups of people on this. The metalheads that are like, oh fuck that, it's not metal, album sucks. The synth people that are like, throw that first half away, it's garbage. And people like me that are like, give me all of it.
Awesome. Thank you, Mondo. All right, before we wrap up, we like to do our dad advice. Eric, you're our guest. So what advice would you like to leave for our audience?
Man, can it be serious?
Yeah, serious. It can be funny, whatever you want.
Okay.
Definitely.
My dad advice is pretty simple, and I've been in the show before, and I might have said this same exact thing, but my dad advice is go to therapy, and then go to more therapy. what I have learned in life is that we all went through things when we were younger that left an impression on us, and a lot of those impressions are negative. There's no trauma Olympics. We're not in a competition, but like we've all been through those things. And whether we know it or not, those things heavily influence how we react to stressors in our life and how we parent our children. And I think we as millennials, Gen X, Gen Z, like we have in human history, like unprecedented opportunity to address like the buildup of generational trauma. And that starts with doing something that I couldn't do for most of my life, which is looking in a vulnerable way, looking deep inside of yourself to like see the ways that you are broken and then getting help. And like, if I can tell people anything, it's like, you're never free of it, but healing is possible. And what you find after a while is that you can actually rewire your brain and start to react to things in a healthier way. It takes a lot of introspection and a lot of work, and finding a good therapist, which is not always easy, but like very worth it. And so that, and just remembering that your children are ultimately, when they are young, they are helpless. You can forget that sometimes because children can be out of control. They can be mean. They can be vindictive. Like kids grow up at a certain age and they just start testing out mean shit to say to you. Or like one thing I struggle with is like my one child will be very mean to her younger sibling. And that brings up a lot of feelings for me, for my childhood. And like, I find it really difficult to react in a measured way in those situations. But what I would say is like, that is your body's way of bringing attention to something that needs work. So, being a parent is not all about working on your children. It's about letting your children be who they are and working on yourself and never stopping that journey.
That's great. And setting a good example for them.
Yeah, because I believe like we as parents like to say verbally the things that we want our kids to remember. But when I really look at myself, the deepest lessons that I learned, both good and bad, were from observing my parents, not from anything they ever said to me.
I think by far the best thing you can do as a parent is to work on yourself, to work on being a better person and dealing with the stuff that is in your life and in your head. I appreciate that in recent times it's become a lot more accepted to be able to talk about these things.
That's why I feel having somewhat of a platform in this world, I feel a responsibility to do it for what I wish for, like, and I apologize for interrupting, Jody.
No,
what I wish for other men to have in their life is avenues to be vulnerable, because I see it. I have male friends and I find I can't even really be vulnerable with most of them the way that I would like to be, because I think it can make people uncomfortable sometimes. So I think that's what men need.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you don't have an outlet.
Right. Like, I think we might be like the first generation to actually have assigned coping mechanisms, or we have
know
access
what that
to, or
fucking means, like
there's times I tell my kids I need to step away for a minute, take a breath. I might go meditate for a few minutes. And there's been times my kids were like, Daddy, you might need to go meditate. Like,
there you go. But again,
they
like,
put it back on me.
Seeing you practice what you preach, I think I'm sure will have a huge impact on them.
And you're just giving them tools too. So when if they eventually become parents, the idea is we're trying to stop this generational trauma that we all went through, that our parents went through, et cetera, et cetera. And like you said, Eric, we have the best chance of actually kind of not ending it, narrowing it down to where it's going to be hopefully ended by the time our great grandkids are around.
And I think that the compounding effect that we'll have generationally is like, you can't calculate it.
Well, and I now you can, at least in my family, we were able to have some good conversations. Like the other day, I had all my older kids around and we were just kind of, talking about things. I have anxiety issues that I take medication for. One of my sons also does. And so we were talking about how, that's probably me passing that on down to you, either genetically or through some other way. And I said, well, and over here, my wife has issues with some sensory things and textures and all that kind of stuff. And that's probably why and we're just, just having conversations where we're talking about, here's our issues. We have ADHD in some of our kids. And so I'm like, yeah, that's probably from, this side of and just being able to talk about these things openly, talk about having to go get treatment or help or therapy or whatever, and not trying to bury any of this. It's part of life. And so I'm very open with my kids about these kind of things.
It's the biggest thing we can do as men is normalize both those things, both for other men and for children. And I don't want to cut the ladies out, but I think that women are often take to these things a little easier than we do. Like, I think a lot of men have to be forced or pushed, or like I was
been a little more acceptable.
I was straight up forced by my life kind of falling apart, and like, all right, it was like I was just having this conversation with my mom today. It was like, the vulnerable part is the key part, because like the first time years ago I went to therapy, I was not capable of being vulnerable. I didn't have it in me, and it was not the right therapist to get it out of me. The next time I went, which was in 2020, I mean, I walked in that virtual door with my guts in my hands, basically. Like, I don't know how else to put it. And just like, here, help me sort this, please. Like, and that's what it is. I mean, it's like observing and filing and rebuilding and fixing. And yeah, like some of it's put together with duct tape, but it's, it's back together.
And again, not to exclude the ladies, but like a lot of the reasons why most of us didn't go to therapy when we were younger is toxic masculinity. Yeah. We were always taught that as a male, you just don't do that. You don't talk about your feelings. You bury that shit deep inside and go have a drink and call it a day, which is not healthy.
And
it's not a healthy way to cope with things.
My father never would have said that to me, because that's not the way he was. Like, he was not outwardly toxic like that. But what I saw was him being blank, basically, like him just absorbing everything and never coming back out. Society pushed that, though. Society as a whole. I mean, that, like, again, male-driven media and stuff like that always put that, like, oh, it's the goofy guy, the weird guy that goes to therapy, or that has depression. So
like I think that generation just didn't have a language to express that, or like the tools available, or like anything defined for them.
And that's one of my favorite things that Elizabeth and I do, is like when we watch old 90s or 80s stuff, it's like, how irresponsible is this therapy scene? Like, how ostracizing are we making people who need mental help feel?
It's funny, because one of these shows that did it best was Sopranos, because you had this guy who was the mafia boss, one of the most powerful people in the East Coast, who routinely was going to therapy and being as vulnerable as possible and telling her, like, I'd probably get killed if they knew I was coming to you, but I need to talk to somebody.
Yeah. Anyway, that's my advice. Sorry to bring the show down.
No, awesome. I love it.
That's great. That's what we like.
Yeah. All right. Well, that wraps up another episode. Eric, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find you?
Go to your podcasting platform and search for Bloody Good Horror. I chose that name for a website I made when I was 18 or 19 years old in like the year 2000. So no, it's not cool, but it works. I also make synth music that I'm very proud of. My latest album is on like anything, Apple, whatever, but mostly I'm on Spotify and Bandcamp. If you search for Hi-Fi, HY-FY, and I would call it like 80s synth inspired music with somewhat of a modern edge on it. Like, and it's inspired by probably Carpenter and John Harrison are probably my two biggest inspirations.
Excellent. And it's like almost like a score to a movie that doesn't exist. That's what I like about it, like the imagery that just kind of conjures.
And I would say follow me on Instagram. I appreciate that. I would say Eric BGH on any socials. I'm on Instagram the most these days. Twitter is kind of a garbage fire. So
yeah, how the threads treating you?
It's fine. I need like a follow list and hashtags, and then I'll check it out.
I think it'll get better.
But if they give me a follow, like a real following list and hashtags, I'm dumping Twitter.
Yeah,
fine.
Same. Every time I open up Threads, I realize I'm not immediately assaulted by things that make me mad. And so I like that.
So,
well, the one thing I was keeping Twitter on for was to promote my stuff, but my engagement got like halved, and I'm not going to pay for Twitter. So
yeah,
you know,
what I liked about Twitter pre Musk was that I could just block all these keywords. So my feed was a constant stream of like horror movies, video games, pro wrestling, and jujitsu stuff I actually love. But then it seems like now I'll still get the freaking ads of stuff that just upsets me. And
did the same, but I found out that there is a limit on how many. Like I even way pre Musk, I hit the limit of how many words you could block.
Oh, I haven't. It's like 40, I think 40 or 60 or something. It's not a lot.
All right. Well, next week we will be back to covering Tales from the Crypt. We'll be doing the season 7 episode, A Slight Case of Murder. We appreciate everyone for listening. We'd really appreciate if you give us a rating or review on iTunes, a rating on Spotify. Check out our YouTube YouTube page for videos of these podcasts. And with that, we thank you for listening to Dads from the Crypt.
Goodbye.
Follow Dads from the Crypt on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or I will follow you to the grave. No, seriously, you really should watch. But be careful what you ask for. You may get it.